Hello! Today I'm back with you with another video about my MCAS application, med school journey, all that good stuff. And so I'll be going over my entire MCAS application. My last video I primarily went over my GPA, my MCAT, and so today I'll primarily be taking you through my extracurriculars, my experiences, and my personal statement. I probably won't be reading that verbatim because that's a lot, but you'll get the overall gist of it, and you'll also find out who I asked for my letter of recommendations. And I think that's all that's in my application, but it's been a while since I looked at it, so let's just get started. And the last time I looked at this was like October or a long time ago, because I was looking over this and I'm like, I don't remember half of these things. So sorry if I'm a little rusty, and sorry if I'm bad explaining what I did and what these experiences were, but I haven't had to think about this in a long time. So, and here on the first page of my application is just some back information, and then my academic record. The first semester at Hopkins was actually covered grades, and so my grades didn't show. Some good classes, had some not so good classes, just because chemistry is not my thing. I'm not good at chemistry. I'm still not good at chemistry. Never learned it in high school. So for better or for worse, I think it's for better that my freshman year grades were, my freshman fall grades were covered. And then, like I mentioned in my previous video, I actually failed a class. So yep. Classes, B's, A's, B's, yeah. Again, more B's, more A's. And my senior year, because of the pandemic and everything was pass-fail. And on this page is just my MCAT and my GPAs. Like I said in my previous video, my GPA did not have an upward trend freshman year because of that failed class. Yeah, and then went up, but then went back down sort of, but went up my senior year because I really pulled my act together and I was like, I need to improve my GPA. Plus I wasn't taking like hard improvement classes, so it definitely helped. My BCPM, as you can see, no trend, kind of random. Thanks to my art classes, because I love art, put so much energy into my art classes, got, I guess, a good non-science GPA. Except for that one class I failed. And if you're curious what my cumulative GPA is and my MCAT scores are, then go watch my last video. I basically go more into it and then kind of ramble on about it, and talk about my journey, etc, etc. So yeah. And so I was that person who was involved in so many different things because I really took college as an opportunity to go and learn and pursue all these things that I'm interested in, because I knew I wasn't gonna get this chance ever again. And so I have a lot of experiences compared to some of the other people I know. And I do want to note that you don't need as many experiences as I have, because like I did a lot in college. You also don't want to show the admissions committee that you spread yourself too thin and you didn't really commit to anything. Like that's not good either. Hopefully that's not how my application came across. I just wanted to do things because I wanted to do things. I do explain that, like, sort of, like, during my interviews and stuff, so yeah. And my first experience here is as a Playmakers intern. This was just with a museum, a children's museum, where I helped them develop a museum access program that reduces cost barriers for families in low socioeconomic statuses. This was a semester-long experience. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to see it to completion or see the program launch just because of COVID, which is really sad because it was actually a really cool and important program that I thought that Baltimore needed and that I saw a need for in patients at the hospital and like the families I interacted with. So that was kind of disappointing, but it was really cool to work in an actual like place, like an actual museum, which was one of my goals like growing up. Like I really wanted to work in a museum. So this was really cool. And then so for my next experience listed here is one of my research experiences. This research experience was primarily looking at arts and medicine and basically what I'm interested in, which was really amazing to find research in this niche at Hopkins, and I'm so thankful that they accepted me to be their research assistant. I basically helped them develop a medical education course. I also learned a lot about visual thinking strategies and the benefits of incorporating art into medical education for future physicians, how that can help their journey and help their soft skills and even hard skills. And I also collected artwork off of like from museums and stuff to incorporate it into an application that could be used at the patient bedside, hopefully to help better foster like a patient-physician relationship. I think I write that here. And yeah, it was a really cool experience, and it's definitely research that I hope that I can continue to into the future. And this is also one of my main talking points, if I recall, for some of my interviews, because if you look at my application as a whole, you can definitely tell that art and medicine, medicine and arts, etc. is completely what I'm interested in, so yeah. And my next experience listed here is with my sorority, Latinos Promoviendo Comunidad, Lambda Pi Chi Sorority Incorporated. I was part of a revival chapter, and then after the chapter came back on campus, I was the treasurer and the social media chair, and I wrote a little bit about what LPC is, and then I primarily went into the events that we host and basically what I did as part of the sorority. And my next experience listed is one of my most important clinical experiences, which is why I have it listed as the most meaningful experience. Having it listed as a most meaningful experience just means that I'm able to write more about it. And then so for the experience description, I just wrote a short line on what the position was, what I did, and I try to highlight a little bit of more of what I did, like during COVID, volunteering extra shifts, etc. And also wrote about a little bit of how this experience impacted me. Again, with all my experiences, I was really trying to find a way of writing each one like slightly differently, if not for format, then for the content, etc., just to keep things a little more interesting. And for my most meaningful experience, like the remark part, I wrote a story because I find that storytelling is one of the most impactful ways you can get a point across, instead of just writing descriptions and stuff that I guess basically like anyone can write, anyone with a similar experience can write. I find that stories are more personal, they're more unique to you, and it helps, and basically I think it can help you stand out more. And so throughout this application you can see that sometimes I end up going for storytelling because I just wanted things to be a little more interesting. And so for this experience, I just basically helped patients in addressing the social determinants of health, such as finding baby formula, such as finding commodities, or like a toy drive for like Christmas time, etc. It was definitely one of the experiences that I talked about the most during my interviews and my applications and like secondary essays, etc., because I had so much experience, meaningful experience from this, and I really enjoy being a patient advocate, and it really influenced the way that I view medicine and the type of doctor that I hope to become. And so this was just a really great experience for me, basically. And for my next experience, it's for when I volunteer in outpatient oncology. This is just pretty standard volunteering in a hospital kind of thing. And so because it is a pretty standard thing, it can be kind of boring if you just write a normal description for it. I went with a story about one of the patients that I saw repeatedly because I thought that would give it a little more pizzazz. And for my next experience, it was a medical mission that I went on, which was really interesting because this was my first experience truly seeing how medicine is practiced in other countries in comparison to the US, and it was just really interesting to see the differences and to compare and contrast it. And I also talked about this experience during some of my interviews because they thought it was pretty interesting, I guess. And my next experience is as a narrative medicine magazine editor. It was called Charm City Stories. You can see a little bit of what that is, what we did. Yeah, this also goes into my thing of art and medicine, and it's also another experience that basically adds to my overall story of basically, I guess, my niche. Another research experience. This was my longest research experience. It was also my first research experience in college, and where I had the most like outcomes, as in like posters and stuff, and potentially a paper if it gets accepted, hopefully. It was a pretty standard kind of behavioral science kind of research experience. Again, my experience description, I wrote about the things I did, pretty standard for a research experience. And then I highlighted that I won a research award that I applied to study XYZ. And yeah. The next is just my shadowing experiences. I just combined all my shadowing experiences into one box because I didn't think they were important enough to highlight individually. I personally feel like it's not necessary to highlight it individually just because people know what you do when you shadow. It's pretty standard. You don't really do anything. So yeah. Next is another one of my most meaningful experiences, which was being part of InterAsian Council. As you can see, InterAsian Council is an umbrella organization dedicated to promoting awareness and educating the community on issues facing the Asian diaspora. I basically worked my way up in this organization. First year I was a liaison, and then I became program director for 2 years, and then my last year, my senior year, I became vice president. And the experience description is just basically a description of what I did, and my most meaningful experience. Again, I went for a storytelling mode, so one of our main events that I thought was really cool to highlight. And then a reflection part, because the reflection part is probably the most important part of all these experiences, just because the reflection is where you can stand out and you can show that you've actually gained something from these experiences and you didn't just do them willy-nilly for no reason. And it's also to show that you've actually processed and thought about what you've done, and I think that is really important. My next experience was another leadership experience. This was another organization I've been with for 4 years. I really loved the staff, so I stayed on. I eventually became the director of this organization, and it was just, I think this is my one experience that doesn't really seem like it fits anywhere else into my application. Like it's like the oddball out, I guess. And for the experience description, I went with a story again, and also highlighted that I worked here over 2019 because I do think it's important to show any like jobs that you took just to financially support yourself. That's an important part of your story, and your overall timeline will help explain things to admissions potentially. And my next experience I'm getting tired of saying my next experience, but I did a lot of things in college because I really thought college was the time to do everything, so here I am. This was a job that I had for all 4 years of college as a laboratory manager assistant. I love my boss, she's great. And this was just a pretty standard explanation of what I did. It was just a regular job, and if you have any just like menial jobs where you feel like doesn't really add anything to your application, I still think you should incorporate it because it shows that you are able to handle like working an actual job with school, which is really important. And it does show a lot of qualities about you as a person and how you can handle things. And so even if you feel like it's not interesting, just write what you did. If you have a cool story to tell, then go ahead and tell that story. And next is a volunteer experience with Art Cart. And with this, I basically went around to patient waiting rooms in the hospital and asked if the kids want to make crafts with me, and there's no kids, and I asked the adults if they want to make crafts with me, again going into my story of art and medicine. And for this experience, I wrote a story. I think a story was the right choice for this, because if I just said I created crafts with patients in the waiting room, like, okay, like I guess it's just not as impactful as like actually hearing about a story of one example. is with a nonprofit that I worked with in high school. They basically help my application to college and my journey to college, and so they are a really important part of my heart, I guess. So I volunteered as a part of their student advisory council. No description of what I did. I think this one looks pretty standard. And this one I only did 50 hours, but I still want to show it because I just really wanted to show different aspects of myself, I guess. And so even though I only did 50 hours for this organization, I thought it could bring a different twist, maybe. Okay, finally. And here's my last experience. It was just another standard volunteering experience that I did. And so I did this my summer going into college, and then the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. I wasn't sure if I should include the hours before going to college, but I thought it was close enough to college that I still included it. But most of my hours did come from this next summer between when I was actually in college. And so this was a pretty standard experience. I was just volunteering in the emergency department and also outpatient surgery. I don't think I wrote a story for this one just because I couldn't think of a specific story that I wanted to tell. And when people see hospital volunteering, I mean, they can guess what I'm doing. So there might have been a better way to write this experience description, but it's okay. And then is my personal statement. Like I said, I won't be reading a verbatim. That's a lot, but it's basically just focusing on my niche of art and medicine art, because that's basically how I wanted to curate my application. So for an entire application, like, it sounds weird to say that I wanted to curate my application, but I did want to do exactly that. And so I feel like my personal statement was used as a way to tie in all these different experiences and to, like I said, curate my application. It's mostly focused on my experiences of art and medicine and why I think art and medicine is extremely important, because art has so many great benefits to medicine, like just not even just like painting and like releasing stress and like how preventing like physician burnout and stuff like that, but it's also really important because it can help you see if you have any biases, and it also helps you process emotions, and just so many great benefits to incorporating art into medicine and medical education. So I really wanted my personal statement to reflect my beliefs in who I am, because although I'm pursuing medicine, I am also, a part of me is also an artist, and that was really important for me to highlight. And so that's basically just what I go into in my personal statement. And so when thinking about letters of recommendation, it's really important to have like different people who can speak to the different sides of you, your different strengths, etc. And so one of my recommenders was my boss. When I was a laboratory manager assistant, I got to know her really well, like personally, and she got to know me very well personally, and so I used her as someone who could just attest to me as a person. My next recommender was my supervisor for the patient advocate experience, because it is important to find someone who can potentially attest to your skills and abilities in communicating and interacting with patients. That is, if you have an experience where you were in direct contact with patients, it is important to find a recommender who can speak to that, because going to medicine kind of makes sense, kind of important. Another recommender was my PI for the neuroimmunology lab that I worked in. I wanted him to speak towards my abilities to comprehend science, because science underlies medicine. Without science, there really is no medicine. My other recommender was the psychiatrist that I work for in my art and medicine research things. I primarily asked her because I needed a recommender for DO school. Some schools actually require you to get a recommendation letter from a physician. Makes sense. They want to make sure that you know what you're doing and that you've had proper experience. Unfortunately, I didn't know a DO well enough for me to ask them for a letter of recommendation, but so I asked her for that. And so I asked 3 professors for my recommendation letters as well. My first recommender was one of my art teachers, art and medicine, art, yeah. My other 2 recommenders were science professors. Both of them were professors who I talked to a lot, especially my senior year, and I knew well. One of them was my department advisor as well, and then so she basically knew me, because obviously you want a recommendation letter from someone who knows you. If you are able to get one, then definitely recommend that. I didn't know any of like my basic science, like biology, chemistry, physics, or math professors well enough, and so I just asked the 2 professors that I know knew me and are science professors, and it's fine if they aren't like a biology, chemistry professor. So yeah, and I think that's all of my application for AMCAS at least. A COMAS, the DO application, actually allows you to put in more experiences, and so I think I have a couple more in there. If there's any other information that I missed today that you guys want to know more about, then just leave a comment and I can help you answer that. Or if it's something that I feel like needs a lot of explanation, then I'll probably make another video about it. If there's anything else that you guys are curious about, if there's any other videos that you guys want to see, just let me know. Thanks for watching!